Welcome to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast where small business owners are celebrated as the backbone of the American economy. Each week, we introduce you to tycoons who share their stories and advice so that small business owners may learn from their experiences. Tycoons is powered by Backbone Planning Partners, FinTrepid Solutions, and Pivotal Advisors. Join us now as our hosts connect you to today's tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host here, as always, Austin Peterson, coming to you from lovely Gilbert, Arizona. It's cooled off. We are officially what I would call an Arizona winter, a high of 70 today. So, we're battening down the hatches. We're putting jackets on. It was only 39 when I went for my run this morning. So it does actually get quite cold in the mornings and overnight, but it's a great time of year. Spent the weekend in Sedona with my wife, did a lot of hiking, did some off-roading, did some mountain biking. It's a great time of year to be in Arizona. So we live for this. But if you're listening to this podcast for the first time and you're wondering what it is we do here at Tycoons of Small Biz, we're a podcast that's put together for small business owners by small business owners. And literally what we do is we interview a new business owner every single week and allow them to tell their story and talk about their successes, talk about their failures, talk about things they've learned along the way so that it can benefit other entrepreneurs and other business owners that are either aspiring to start their own business or currently own their own business. So with that being said, we definitely have a tycoon of small biz on the phone, on the program with us today. We've got Dustin Carreon with C.O.I Holdings coming to us from Newport Beach, California. Dustin, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Austin? Great to be here. Yeah, 39 in Southern California is like below freezing, so that's pretty cold. But hey, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast. I've listened to it quite a few times. I really appreciate what you and your partner, Landon, do for small businesses, and also your practices, what you do for small businesses. Really appreciate it. An honor to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, if for those listeners who aren't familiar, Backbone Planning Partners is Landon and I's company, and we believe so strongly that the backbone of the American economy is the small business owner that we named our practice Backbone Planning Partners. So thanks for mentioning that. Really appreciate it. But Dustin, before we kind of jump into the business side of things, which you have a great story, we've had, a pre-qual call like we do with all of our guests, but your story is a unique one, and I want to jump into that. But let's start on the personal side first. So tell us about, where you grew up, what life was like as a kid. Are you married today? Do you have kids? Did you go to college? If so, what did you study? Those types of things. So what would you like to tell us about you personally?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up just right outside of Los Angeles. Both of my parents were kind of blue collar workers, right? Well, my mom was stay at home, but she eventually worked and got away from us, myself and my two younger brothers. So I'm the oldest of three. And my dad, interesting, was in the scrap metal business. So most of his life, he was like one of those guys that was working behind a scale when you go to sell your aluminum cans. So on top of that, my mom and dad both had this hobby of like collecting junk. So I kind of grew up watching that. And that was kind of what drew me into entrepreneurship without really knowing it. We would go to garage sales, estate sales on Saturdays, and then buy something for $1, a lamp or whatever it is, and then go to the swap meet the next day and sell it for $5. And I just love that, right? We were the ones that we didn't have a lot. We didn't grow up extremely poor. My parents did. But we didn't grow up rich, right? So, I was on food stamps and got assistance, but I didn't really understand what all that was. As a result of that, we were able to go out and do things outdoors. So instead of like going to Disneyland, we ended up going to the beach, and we were picking up metal cans and aluminum cans and metal detectors. So we really looked kind of odd, but we loved that. It was a treasure hunt, right? You never know what you're going to find. So I got introduced to that really young. And my mom and dad got a divorce. I moved in with my dad. And around this time, this is something that I don't always share a lot. A lot of people don't know this about my background, but as a teenager, I got in a lot of trouble. And it's kind of important to me to mention that, because struggling young and early, even though I don't recommend it, is a good thing. And I also struggled with addiction really bad too at that age. As a result, I got put away for a while, went through the juvenile hall court system. It was the best thing that happened to me at that time, because what it did was, through those struggles and through that pain, I ended up learning a lot of lessons. And part of the lessons was that I, for the first time, was starting to become trustworthy. And by the time I got out of these institutions, I was kind of released back into normal life again. And getting a job, going to school. I mean, I had like a junior high school education. I dropped out when I was in the 6th grade. And what happened was, I had this desire to, okay, what do I want to do with my life, right? Well, I got to go back to high school. So I was juggling a lot of things, got a job at a gas station, got a job at a laundromat. It's terrible at all those things. But the important thing is that I had structure in my life. And I had a purpose in my life. And one of those things was like, well, look, if I could get out of trouble, then maybe I could help other kids or juveniles get out of trouble. And that helped me. And, when I was 18, I was able to, I had 2 jobs, was going to night school, and I was able to graduate from high school, and had no idea what I wanted to do. So I ended up started to work with my dad. My dad had his own business at this one time. He had a 1 or 2 man scrap operation running from our 3-bedroom apartment. So in our apartment, there was like cans and drums and oil all over the floor, and there was trucks outside. And I asked my dad to work with him, and he said no, because he knew I'd probably be terrible. But this is how I got my start in the business that I'm in today. And, before I dig into that, around this time, I got in a relationship, and I had a son at the age of 20. So, my son is in 28 today. And, years of that, of being a father, being involved in the business, later starting my own business, and then trying to give back has been a big part of my life. And, it was able to juggle all those things. Growing up really fast taught me a lot of things. So I didn't go on to college. I started working with my father, and I'm sure we'll drill into that. From that point is that I was able to start the business that I still own today. Today, I'm married today for almost eight and a half years now. Probably get yelled at that. Live down in South Orange County, and yeah, I'm just living my dream, as they say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time now, about 2.5 years. We've recorded 130 something episodes. I think you're 131 or 132, to be honest with you. And every entrepreneur has their own story. And there's a bunch of different versions of that story, right? Some grew up in families of entrepreneurs and did very, very well. Some grew up in families of entrepreneurs and didn't do very well. Some got into trouble, some didn't. Some have Ivy League, degrees. Some of them, have GEDs. I mean, the reality is, or I guess the biggest lesson from what you just went through is what you do as a kid. It's not that it doesn't matter. But just because you got into trouble, or you had addiction issues, or you had a child at a young age, like, none of those are excuses to say that I can't build a business and be successful in America.
100%. And I think what happens is that whether you're dealt a bad hand in life, like a lot of us have, or whether you accomplish the unthinkable, right? Like if I was to hear a story like mine, or somebody that went through issues and then hear about it today, I would just kind of go like, no, that's no way that could happen to me, right? So I think once you experience that, you start to realize that there's hope, and that anybody, like, oh, there's nothing I can't do today, right? You start to believe that. And the thing is that, like you said, it's so true. Everybody has their own journey. So just because that was my path doesn't mean that it's the path for everyone else, because it all has to do with timing, right? Like if I would have doing what I do today, which is quite different than what I did in the beginning, even though I'm still in the business. If I would have started off doing that back then, what I'm doing today, I just wasn't ready. I had a lot to learn.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've probably read or listened to this book, Beyond Entrepreneurship, and now they've got like the 2.0 version.
Right.
And I'm re-listening to it now. And I was listening to it this morning on my run, and it actually talked about how, especially today, a lot of startups believe that you've got this visionary entrepreneur that comes up with this great idea, but you get to a certain point and then you have to bring in a professional manager, right? And sometimes that's the truth, right? I mean, that's the reality. Sometimes they're just inventors, they're just idea people, and they don't really want to or can't run a business. So sometimes it's true. But I think that tends to be a crutch a lot of times. And they start naming off all of these individuals that, what if they had done that to these people? And they actually did it with Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs was kind of forced out and then had to come back in and save the company, right? And the thing is, like you just said, like at the beginning, you may not be ready to run an organization that has thousands of employees and has, is the first company to ever hit $1 trillion market cap, right? But later on, when he came back in, he kind of grew into that. And we all have that in us. We all have to grow into certain things. And there's a reason that most of the time you start a business as yourself, as a solopreneur, and then you kind of build into it. And we're going to talk a little bit more in our interview today with, the difference, because you've done both. You started a company, you took over your dad's company, you've bought other companies that were already existing. So, there's going to be a lot of different things for us to discuss today. But I think that, that idea that you just laid out of growing into certain things is super important, right? I mean, I've got a 22-year-old son. He's not ready to step in and run my business, but that doesn't mean that in 20 years he won't be.
Right.
Yeah. So very interesting. So let's kind of start at the beginning, right? So you started working with your dad. What did that kind of lead to, in terms of business and like your first business? And then I want to tie that into kind of really the biggest failure along the way and lessons that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, well, I have plenty of those. And, it's funny. I was involved in Vistage for years, a peer-to-peer advisory board group. And I got so much of it. I have, lifelong friends today. One of the things, and again, I don't want to get too far off what we're talking about, but I remember one meeting, we went around the room. And the question was, every CEO had to basically say, if there was one, what is the one truth that my employees have no idea, right? Like if I was to tell my employees one thing, and the common answer was that my employees don't know the fact that I don't know what I'm doing half the time, and that's really what it is. And that ties into that when you start your own business, or when you start off, even if you're just working for somebody, like I did with my dad in the beginning, when you're young, you have no idea what you're doing. And the thing is that I wouldn't take those risks today, knowing what I know. And when you're young and you just, you're just so arrogant, for me, not everybody is, most people are not, but I was, and I thought I knew everything. So I started working with my dad in the 90s, right after high school. And it was my dad and I, and my dad's brother, my uncle. And the business's job was basically, we would have these like milk runs, right? My dad would go to like local machine shops and he would have barrels of metal, and all of the borings and the scrap and the leftover stuff would go in these containers. So we would pick it up, take it to our little 2,000 square feet warehouse with the yard. And so we would do that. And what happened around that time in the scrap business was that in like the early to mid 90s, there was this revolution in PCs, right? So like, and again, it's been such a long time since I'm in this business. A lot of friends and family still think like, hey, how's the metal business going? Like, and the thing was that we were in that business, but what happened was that everyone started, like, we hear about it today, but it was really a kind of an unknown thing back then. Everyone started getting rid of old computers, right? Old computers, and then companies, instead of having PCs or instead of having servers, like in your back room, you had these giant mainframe computers. And these mainframe computers were like the size of a refrigerator. So these companies started calling us up, right? And they started like, hey, will you get rid of this for us? How much will you give that for us? And what we started to do was take these things apart and sort out the aluminum, the good metals, and the copper from the steel. And inside of these mainframes are circuit boards. And in these circuit boards, there's chips, right? Semiconductors, the things that we're all talking about now. Well, back then, we didn't know what it was, but we knew that there was precious metals in there. So we started recycling that stuff, right? We started, popping off some of the chips, going to refiners. And it was going back to the whole swap meet analogy of being a scavenger and finding all kinds of things. Like one day you go to one place and they have you pick up some steel fences or some metal beams. And the next day it's like, hey, we got all these microwave ovens, can you take? And it started becoming that, like really, Sanford and Sons, it was really like that. And, there's a show, I think, on A&E or Discovery, Storage Wars. And that's basically what it was kind of like with us. Like we would go to these companies, right? Like big companies, Fujitsu, and these are some of these accounts we had. And they're like, hey, we have a storage bin and we need to move out of it. And they had a bunch of surplus, it was everything. It was metal, it was scrap, it was electronics, maybe printers. We don't get to go in there and like inventory it. You're like, you have 5 minutes to make a bid on it because another guy, your competitor, is going to come and make a bid on it. So that's literally what it was. From this time, we were just in the right place at the right time. And we were, and on top of this, like, again, it was like my dad and I, when business got tough, we had a truck and we would knock on these companies' front doors and go, hey, we're here to pick up your scrap. And if you have electronic scrap, we'll pay you for it. Oh, we don't have any. And then my dad would like, let's go back at 3 in the afternoon. We'd go back after they closed and all of it was in the trash. All of it was in the trash and it's going to go into the environment, right? So we would pick it up. So out of this evolved this chain of events. And what happened is we started getting a lot of semiconductors, a lot of brand new components that were being scrapped. And instead of scrapping them for $5 a pound, we could inventory these items and go out to other companies that are still using these. Meaning, instead of throwing this in the trash, there's other companies that are still using these parts. Electronics go obsolete all the time. So we started writing them down. And I have this mentality, and my dad's just like, oh, I don't want to have inventory. Let's just sell it. I don't care to make $5. I care to make 50 cents so we could get it off the books. And my dad had this mentality where he was working with companies that had large yards, a lot of employees. And I'm this, idiot thinking that, no, let's do it this way. So there was always this clash of ideals. And my ideal was, how can we scale this? So I started to learn kind of the chip business, right? Even though I'm not an engineer, I don't have an understanding. This is pre-internet. So we started kind of separating these two businesses. Because the scrap business and selling new electronic parts that may end up at Best Buy, it's not good quality control. So that's kind of how we got started, Austin, is I had this business plan that was basically written on a napkin. This is in 1996. I'm probably approximately 24 years old, 23. And I go, let's separate the two businesses. I'll have this electronic side of the business where we're dealing with two parts. It will be a subsidiary of the metal company. And it's probably not going to work out, but we have a truck and we could always go back to scrap. So I ended up signing a 6-month lease, and that's all my dad, kind of gave me or let me borrow from the other company's funds, which wasn't a lot, a few, $4,000 or $5,000 or whatever it was. and that was going to be a deposit. And we'll just sign a 6 months lease so we could get out of it and leave and go back to the old scrapyard. And that's pretty much what happened. And then at that first year or two, the whole chip business just started going crazy. We kind of evolved. We upgraded to a 1,200 square feet building to like a 2,800 square feet building. And then we outgrew that. And we just started buying. We started going to other companies. I started going all over the country, started going to big defense contractors like Raytheon, Lockheed, IBM, Motorola, and we started buying truckloads of material. And we started keeping the good things that we know we could resell, right? So I would look at chips and go, we're going to pay 5 cents on the dollar, but maybe 5 years from now, somebody may use this. And we would put it into stock. We would put out catalogs, and then we would scrap all the rest of the stuff. And I'm kind of a hoarder. So when you buy something for 5 cents and then you sell it for $5 later, you start thinking everything's going to sell. So you have to kind of know what you're good at and so that's kind of how it started, and it evolved this whole thing. And then around the 2000s or so, things just started going crazy, and kind of where I'm at today. I won't, ramble on too much longer, but what ended up happening with the scrap company and the company that Freelance Electronics, the company that I still have today, is in 1999, probably the most challenging thing that I ever went through emotionally, business-wise, is my dad got diagnosed with cancer in his 50s, and right in 1999, and it became apparent pretty early on that it was going to be a very, very difficult thing for him to beat. So it was tough. We had these two businesses. I was technically part owner in a scrap business, and it was like, what are we going to do? There was really no business plan, or there was no really any type of succession plan. So he, long story short, he ended up passing away. And I ended up buying the shares of his scrap metal business. I ended up closing that down because it just wasn't profitable. He was the only one. And it was really a tough time. That was the time that I was ready, because we were having some inner squabblings with him and his family and his wife and my stepmom. And there was all these things. And that's when I just decided, none of this is really important. I'll sell everything, start all over. But it all worked out. So yeah, I ended up taking full control over the company and buying out the shares. And that's kind of where we're at today. I mean, things have evolved and changed, but that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think those things are tough regardless. Right. And I believe with the timing of our pre-qualification call that we talked about my dad being diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic cancer, in July, and passed away in August. And so, that already is tough to deal with. Right. But then you have to think about, we own a company together, and we don't really have an agreement in place that specifies what happens when dad passes away. And he's got a wife who's entitled to his portion of the business. And so you start to let these things unravel, and you realize, oh my gosh, even with a small company that, is insignificant by most people's measures, it's still important to have those types of things in place. Right? It's super important the larger the organization becomes, because then it becomes more complex. And if there are multiple partners and multiple spouses and, all those sorts of things. And so extremely important lesson, I think, that you learned, early on. And the other thing that I heard from that was, yes, there's all of that, and we should have done this the right way. But I also heard, ultimately, that's not what's most important in life, right? Like, the relationship with my dad and working with my dad was most important. And, we had these inner squabbles that were happening with the rest of his quote unquote new family, your step family. And, and I wasn't there. I don't know exactly how it all unraveled, but it sounds like you just said, what, there are things that are more important than the business. I'm going to try to take care of my stepmom and repair that relationship and let us both move on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Austin. And I remember us talking about, your father too, and those challenges. So you understand. And then what you do with small businesses, you see this all the time. It's a normal thing. And even with larger companies, you see this all the time, right? So The thing was that I had to let go of my pride and ego and think inside my head, right? It's that I wanted everyone to know that I'm the one that started this company and it's my business and nobody else can run it, and everything else is just kind of whatever. But I had to let that go. It's not that important, right? It's really not. It's important, but not more important for the relationship that I want to have with my family and the peace of mind. So how do we just how do we come to agreement? How do we just let this, and it just all kind of worked out. And the thing was that the thing that got me to that point, as far as, being able to help grow a company, right? From zero to, $1 million in a very short amount of time. And again, it's not something that I take credit for. It was just kind of timing and the market. But it was really kind of my dad's genius. And his genius was that he just let me do whatever I wanted. Like, I wasn't a trustworthy guy. Well, now I'm a trustworthy guy. And he grew up from the generation, right, where, you have to figure it out on your own. I'm not going to bail you out. You lose money, I don't want you to lose money, but you make a mistake, you're going to figure it out. If you have issues, you're going to figure it out. And it's a family business in a sense where, yeah, I'm the shareholder, but I have a brother, I have an uncle, I have another brother, and that's not easy, right? You're having to be nice and try to do the hard thing, but there's arguments going on, there's tension, it's coffee, things being thrown around the office, and it's like, I got to run a business here. We're a family, and we have employees, but I'm running a business. But again, my father allowed me to kind of make those mistakes. And my father, as far as being a mentor to me, never, and this isn't a knock on him. He never told me he never showed me how to, well, I'll take that back. I watched him. He showed me by example. He never lectured. He never says, oh, we're going to sit down and I'm going to show you how to do calculations. And I'm going to show, my dad's a metal guy, right? So it was like, you need to figure that on your own, and you're going to do it on your own. What he did was he supported. So I learned so much from just kind of at that point, up to that point that my dad passed away. There were so many lessons in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my dad was the same way. I don't remember how much we got into my dad's background, but my dad was a stucco contractor. Before that, he was a mechanic. And before that, he grew up on a farm. Right. And so, as blue collar as they come, had a GED, right, and didn't pursue anything further than that because he dropped out of high school, younger, and then went and did get his GED. But everything that I learned from him was taught the same way. It was by his example, right? I mean, we talked. It's not that he didn't, teach me certain things, but he never taught me the technicals of anything. It was really the biggest lesson that I learned from my dad was work hard. And it doesn't matter, work hard, treat people fairly, be a good person, right? And I think that those are lessons that anybody should be learning from, obviously from their dad, if they're around, mom as well, parents, but that is, in my estimation, even though I work with people who have very successful businesses and we deal with really important financial issues, the most important aspects of everything that we do inside of our organization is helping them to understand what's most important. The money stuff, the legal documents, all of that, honestly, that's the easy stuff, right? Does every business owner know it? No. And that's why I have a business that thrives, right? Because I have that expertise and that knowledge and I can help them. But I believe that the most important thing that I do is help them realize what's most important to them. And then the planning follows all of that. Yeah. So, all right. So let's first, I am going to pin you down on what you believe is your biggest failure so far in business, right? So it doesn't have to be just one, but what's your biggest failure? And then I'm going to allow you to turn that and say, what's the accomplishment that you're most proud of?
Yeah, thanks for that. there are so many different failures, and I think, there's mistakes, there's failures. I guess there's somewhat of a difference. We're supposed to learn from them and go on. I used to think that my biggest failure is doing what I'm doing today, even though I'm still a business owner, but as far as acquiring small businesses, right, and trying to run them, like I should have done this a long time ago, right? That's what I thought it was. And again, I wasn't ready. So it wouldn't have mattered. But I would say one of my biggest the one that stings, the one that I constantly rub my nose in front of people to remind me is really, I would say it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And I made the decision, Austin, that I was going to step down and running the day-to-day operations of Freelance Electronics, right? The electronic component company. And I'm sure I'll go into that, a little bit more in detail, how I made that transition. But I realized that I had to get out of the kitchen, right? It was just getting too hot. I realized that I had a lot of weaknesses that I wasn't able to overcome, and I just wasn't a real good operator anymore. And I don't mean that. I could operate a business. I did what I had to do, but I just didn't have the desire for it. So what I did was I'm going to step down. I'm going to still oversee the company, but I need to get like a real operations person, right? Somebody that's going to take the vision and grow the company and do exactly the way I was doing it. And I recruited someone who was a recommendation from somebody else that I trusted and respected. And what I did was he was the only person I talked to. I met him a couple times. We ate, we had lunch, and it just kind of felt right. This is the guy, right? I didn't know a lot about him. And there were some red flags. And again, when I say that something didn't work out or if it's a mistake, especially when it came to a hiring decision, right? Because that's what this is about. It's really about a key hire, is that it always comes down to me. It really does. And I'm not just saying that to try to sound humble, but it's like, look, all of the red flags and all of the things are up there. It's like dating, right? We meet somebody and we want it to work out so bad because I have this agenda. I want to be done with my business. I don't want to retire, but I want to focus on something else. And I didn't even know what that was, Austin. I was just like, I want to invest. I want to maybe become sounds crazy, but it's actually what I wanted to do and still think about doing someday. But yeah, I wanted to start a fund and manage money and, buy businesses. And I still didn't have a plan. I just knew I had to work on that. Right. And so I hired this person, and it was a disaster hire. It almost, and again, it's not a fault of this person. It's more has to do with culture fit. It's hiring the person that wasn't a culture fit. I have a culture that's me, meaning these are people that are not like me, but we have the same goals. And we've done a lot of, through mentorship and through coaching, right? I was able to get my company on board with what we were doing. I had a kind of a fine-tuned machine with the people that we had, and they were together. And then you bring in this person to lead the company that they don't really know, and this person just wasn't a good fit. And it almost destroyed the company. I had several people leave. After I had one key employee that ended up coming back, that's still with me today, ended up leaving later on after that. There was mistrust. I had to go back in there and fix it. And I had to really go there and apologize because this is their company as much as it was mine. I'm not there all the time. This is their company, and I'm bringing somebody in that does not meet the culture. So I really had to, what I try to do today is hire slowly, take my time, make sure that the person fits our culture. And it's all about culture for me, right? Having the right people. You talk about integrity. That's what my dad was all about. And that's one of the most important things. And this person didn't fit a lot of those, but this person probably fit in other organizations that worked out well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reality is everybody's heard hire slowly, fire quickly, right? And we've all heard it. We all struggle with it. We all make hiring mistakes. But what I heard you do, and I don't think that it was just, feigned humility, is you took responsibility, right? Because it was ultimately your decision. Just because he didn't fit with the culture doesn't mean that he's not great at what he does. It just wasn't the right cultural fit. And that ultimately comes down to you. And we've literally had this conversation recently with a client where, well, I had this controller that did this, and I had this general manager that did this. And okay, great. They did do those things, but ultimately that's your responsibility. You can't just completely take your eye off the ball and trust that they're going to do things the way that they need to be done, and then just blame them. And now he's, they're gone. He's having to jump back in, much like you had to, and kind of fix it, and then try to do it again the right way the next time.
Yeah, I want to jump in here because you said something that touched on an issue or an obstacle that we're dealing with right now in one of my companies. And it's the fact that we think, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself too, but I see this all the time. We think, Austin, because we delegate. Delegation is the key, right? We hear about that. What's the key to growth? What's the key to success? What's the key to try to scale in your business, right? And it's delegate, and it's so hard for us, right? Like we're all crazy to be to want to be business owners. Who wants to do this, right? It looks great, but once you do it from scratch, right? Once you start something, it's like, what am I doing? Because it's like, I'm doing everything. I'm here at the office till 10 at night. I got to keep my weekends open. It's all this stuff. So then we're told, well, no, the good news is that you could delegate, find the next you, find the Austin 2.0, find the next Dustin 2.0, whatever. So I'm thinking in my head, I just delegate and I'm done with it, right? But the thing is that, what's that whole thing, trust but verify? It's like delegation means follow-up, right? This is what I'm learning, and we're learning it right now. I teach this to the people in my organizations. It's like, I have to know who I'm delegating to, right? So who I'm delegating to, what is their area of competence? If it's somebody that's an expert in this field, if I am delegating my business to a fractional COO or CFO, right? Chances are that my follow-up is the most important thing with delegate. My follow-up is not going to have to be every day. I have expectations on that. This is what I need you to do, but I can't just expect them, because I'm kind of, very protected over my time now. So why do I have to follow up with them? They should know this. But the thing is that everyone's kind of differently. So just delegating and saying delegating and I let go. And that was the thing with business. I don't know if you ever feel like this, Austin. It's like, for me, it's like, okay, I'm too controlling. I'm a micromanager. And then when I let go, I don't care anymore. They think I don't care. So I have to show up. I have to make sure. And that's the thing out of the business owner is that, look, my advice is to everyone out there, and this is to myself also, is that we're not running a popularity contest, right? I'm not here to make best friends, but I'm here to run a business. And the gift that comes out of that, of trying to run a good business, is that you get these fringe benefits, and there are relationships that you get with people. There is the joy of running a business, watching something grow, but it's also, if I do those things, everything else will follow. The money will follow, the growth will follow, and all that. So hope that makes a little bit of sense on the delegation part.
Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world, because you're right. You want to let go so badly that you fully let go, and you don't do that follow-up that you mentioned. So let's take a quick break. We'll hear a quick call to action for our listeners, and then we'll jump back into kind of what you're doing today and the obstacles that come along with that as well.
Thank you.
Hey there, Tycoons. Austin Peterson here, co-host of Tycoons of Small Biz. If you think you have what it takes to be considered a tycoon, and you're wondering how you could become a featured guest, please follow and then message us at Tycoons of Small Biz on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a conversation with you to see if it is a mutually good fit, and if so, we'll get you scheduled for an interview. If you're unsure about being a guest on our podcast, but are contemplating selling your business over the next few years and you'd like to know what your business is worth, Please also follow us and then message us on LinkedIn for your no obligation, informal valuation of your business. We look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening to the Tycoons of Small Biz podcast. And now, back to today's program.
All right, welcome back, Tycoons. We're here with Dustin Carreon, CEO of C.O.I. Holdings in Newport Beach, California. So, Dustin, we've kind of covered quite a bit. I mean, your beginnings in scrap metal, and then moving over to chips and technology, and all those sorts of things. We talked about the struggle of letting go and some of the failures that can be made in making hiring mistakes. So let's quickly talk about one of the accomplishments that you're most proud of. And then I really want to kind of dig into what you're doing now with buying businesses and the different struggles that kind of come along there.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I think that as far as accomplishments, I like to look at it at milestones, right? I'll kind of touch on that. And this is for me, I'm not trying to confuse your question here, but when I think like I accomplished something, what happens is that I start to get too comfortable, right? and I think that I have to always, for me, the famous coach, one of the great coaches for the Lakers, Pat Riley, said, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And I truly believe that for myself. It's a little torturous for people like us. We're just, some of them are, I'm not smarter than anybody else or dumber than anybody else. I'm just wired a little bit differently. And so for me was that one of the things that really helped me was creating a structure to grow my business and look into the future. And what it is, it's like a type of roadmap, right? I learned this when I was in my advisory group. And it's about kind of looking outward, right? And looking into the future and saying, what does my company look like, right? What do I see my company in 4 or 5 years? What is it that I think that what happened was, I'll kind of give you a little story, was that, and this is tying into a little bit of what I'm doing today or how I made that transition. But I think to me, this is one of the things that I'm really kind of proud of my organization and that kind of step. So I was in my advisory board group, and around this time, 2015, 2016 or so, right around the time I made that bad hire, was that I felt like I could do everything I could to grow my business past a certain revenue number, right? At Freelance Electronics, the industry was changing, and I was at this turning point. Either I throw a bunch of money into it and hire a bunch of people and buy a bunch of equipment, and everything was getting technical. So the electronic parts nowadays, there's a lot of testing that goes into it, right? If you're a reseller, you have to test it. You have to make sure that the part works, that it's not counterfeit. There's all these quality control issues that go into this. And I made this decision that, look, I could throw a bunch of money into this, but I don't feel comfortable putting any money into this. So what am I going to do? I don't want to sell the business. It's still generating great cash flow, right? So, my return on investment, my return on assets, whatever you want to call it, was high. So I looked at it like on an Excel spreadsheet, and I says, if I just run out of inventory, I could keep this business going for another 5 or 6 years. And what can I do with these funds? And at that time, that it's like, look at what I've been doing the whole time since the time I was a kid is investing, buying something and selling it. Yeah, I know how to talk to people. I know how to sell things. I know how to organize. I'm very focused at times when I work on goals. But it's like, what is it that I'm really doing? What is the business I'm really in? We really don't ask each other that, right? Like, what is the real business I am? Well, I'm in selling parts. No, I'm not. I'm in the business of buying something and trying to resell it and make a profit, right? And so it's at this time that, I got this vision. I started reading. The thing that changed my life was reading a Brian Tracy book. I was in San Jose in the airport, I pick up this book. I'm a reader today. I wasn't an avid reader back then. I was reading like stupid stuff, but and then this book just kind of changed my life. It was it was the road to wealth, so the way to wealth. And all that I got from the book is that, look, I need to get a plan together. And I need to have a vision for where I want to be. And I need to improve on that all the time. And it's at this time that I really, heard about Warren Buffett. I heard the name and I started studying him, reading everything on him. And I started learning more about business from him. And one of the things is that, what is it that makes a company great, right? What is that one thing that is good in a company that I didn't really know anything about, right? And it was about what is its area of competence? What is the one thing that company does great? And what is its competitive advantage? What is the moat in that business? And I realized is that if I can't figure that out, then I got to do something else. And I couldn't really figure that out at my company, which I still own today. It's not a knock on this company. It's still doing pretty well. But at that time, so that's when I came up with this thing, kind of like a mini Berkshire Hathaway. I put it on paper and I put, holding company, which I didn't have a holding company. And I put Freelance Electronics. And then I put all these other companies underneath, and the synergies and who's going to manage them. And then with the cash flows, what I'm going to do. And it was just like this, it was kind of a joke, but I kind of wanted it. And then at that time I had a business coach, and, her name's Linda, and, I love her to death for this. She goes, "You're going to share that in your group." And I'm like, "I want to share this. It's not real yet." She goes, "No, you're going to share it." So I put it on a slide, and I'm like, and when somebody tells me to do something, I take it seriously. If I tell myself to do something, I don't. So I'm like, okay. And I did it. And after I was done doing it, my friend Wade, I think it was the second or first time at that group. And I really look up to this guy. This guy's a real titan of small business. And he says, "I want to do that. See what you put on that paper? That's what I want to do." And I'm like, and at that time, Austin, is where I realized, you know what, this is where I need to go. This is where I need to go. And that's kind of, what kind of transpired for that. So I think that as far as accomplishments, I don't know if that's a real accomplishment, but it's something that I'm really proud of, is that, it was that vision, right? Able to kind of get that on paper and kind of able to execute that. And that was the first big step for me. And once I did that, then, and I'm not saying it's easy, but things just kind of started to flow after that. I knew what I wanted to do, and it took a long time to get there. But once I start doing it, like today, it's like that saying, it's like, work in your business like you've been doing this the whole time. What I'm doing, like you've been, and what I'm doing today feels like I've been doing it for a long time. It's exactly where I'm supposed to be for today. I don't know about 5 years from now, but I know about today, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Sorry if I get real excited. I get pumped up with this stuff, Austin. Don't ask me these questions anymore.
You're doing great. It's exactly what we're hoping to get. So, essentially what you've pivoted to, you still have Freelance Electronics. It's still operating. It's still throwing off that cash flow. It's super important as a business owner. But you've taken that cash flow and maybe other dollars, you can talk about that, but you've decided to form a holding company and go out and buy existing businesses and then help manage them, grow them, and then sell them? Or is it a buy and hold operation that you've got going?
It's a buy and hold forever. It's a buy and hold forever. And I'll tell you, Austin, like I could go in a little bit in some of the companies, but I could tell you about, well, let me just back up. So we have a total of 4 companies. 3 of the companies we acquired in the last 5 years. So my first actual acquisition, like buying my first business is a company, owner founder. It's been around for, since the 70s. And the company is a distributor of aerospace and defense hardware, right? So Fasteners is really their main business. And they not also sell to companies that are dealing with aerospace contractors and defense contractors, but they also sell a lot to companies that manufacture medical devices. So one of our biggest accounts is a company that manufactures and assembles prosthetic legs, and they're a big player in the Olympics. So anything with athletics, those are our bolts that you see on those. So it was really kind of an interesting thing. And this is a business that I kind of knew a little bit about, but nuts and bolts always scared the heck out of me. And look, it's like understanding businesses. It's like one of the things that I learned most about investing in Warren Buffett is that I'm not smart enough to predict the future, right? And just because the past was good doesn't mean that the future is not going to be good. But I know that nuts and bolts are not going to change because of Facebook or Google or Twitter, right? They're not going to go away. It's boring businesses. And it was a small enough business where I was just like, wow. And I was looking for a very short amount of time, and this business just kind of fell on my lap. I went out and I started looking on the business forums, found a broker. It was close by. I kind of thought I could understand the business pretty well. They didn't call me back. I kept calling. I have to buy this business. I mean, of course it has to make sense, but I knew, Austin, that I needed to get this one. I think I could run it. And boy, were we in for a big surprise, because, there is a big difference in starting a company versus buying a company that's not really yours, right? You inherit it from an owner founder, and you're inheriting a culture that's very different from a culture that I'm used to. But the thing that gives me chills is that, so we have that company. We also have another company that we acquired 2 years ago in the state of Washington and in the Seattle area. And what they do is they're just an old school, run-of-the-mill distribution company, delivering company. We service like companies that manufacture food processing equipment. They make trailers. Other companies make trailers. They make fences. Another company makes espresso machines for Starbucks. And what we do is we do what's called bin stock and VMI programs. So we refill their shelves. If they need nuts and bolts, we put nuts and bolts. If they need PPE supplies, we give them PPE supplies. If they need whatever they need, we'll find it for them. And it's a good run-of-the-mill company that's going to be around. And I inherited this staff there. It's just so great. They're just like the textbook culture. And then we have a company that we acquired last year in the Los Angeles area. That's, our biggest acquisition so far. It's a decent sized company for us. It has approximately, I think we're at 20 or 21 employees at this time right now and growing. But they're primarily in the rivet and fastener distribution business and bolts, and they sell to aerospace, defense, airlines, business jet companies that manufacture and maintain. And they're one of the bigger suppliers for a specific type of rivet on the West Coast. And that's a company that's been around since the 1950s. I bought it from a second generation owner. And the thing that gives me chills is that the pressure's on me and my holding company, right? Now, I don't do this all by myself. I have a great team. And we're able to pluck people out of other companies. And we are coming in there as not knowing a lot about the business, but how can we help this business be successful, right? What is it that we do? So, we have like this 90-day plan, and we go in there and we just try to understand the business. And it's tough because, Austin, they're not going to trust us. They're going to, they don't know if we're going to liquidate them or sell them. They have no idea for that. So we're actually there to help them, to work for them. But yeah, the pressure's really on. And, God, hope we don't mess this up. But the thing is that the reason why, the main difference, and I could go in this, I could drill down on this if we have enough time, but the real main difference is that, you're dealing with a company that's been around for a long time, that has a seasoned staff that have usually been with the owner for the long time. And the reason why I'm so attracted to this is that I cannot create this kind of business on my own. I could put together millions of dollars somehow, and I can't, those accounts that they have, those OEMs, those companies, they've been selling to for 20, 30, or 40 years. They have quality procedures that I cannot replicate. They have staff that have been there for a while. I cannot go in there and get it. These are sticky customers, and these are industries that are probably going to be around for a little while. And that is the moat. That is the thing that's really interesting for these, for these American, American businesses that are just so great. And when you're starting a business, not that I wouldn't do it again, it's, you have nothing to lose, right? You're going in all in, and it's like, oh, I could just shut this down and work out of my truck and make enough money. But when you're buying a business, there's a lot more responsibility. But again, we're not doing it alone. We're just trying to say, hey, we want to hold this forever, but how can we, what can we do to maintain the business? What can we do to make it better? What are the things that we can bring to kind of help this business? And I don't always know that. I have to kind of figure that out from them. But anyways, yeah, this is kind of what we're doing. And that's the thing that I'm so excited for in the future, is that there's 10,000 baby boomers, as you know, Austin, retiring every day. There's a ton of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of good businesses. There's a lot of bad ones, but again, we're just looking for the ones that kind of fit our area of competence.
Yeah, and I think that there are some really important points that you made there. Is I think nowadays, especially the younger generation, it's all about tech, right? It's all about high tech. It's about, something that has to revolutionize the world. But the reality is, these, as you put it, these boring businesses that are out there, they're profitable, they're well run, they're selling something that is not going to go away. Will there be innovation? Potentially, and there has been, right? But it's things that aren't going to go away. I mean, you talked about rivets, you talked about nuts and bolts, and now I'm going to forget what the last one was, but they're all those run-of-the-mill, really boring businesses. And one thing that, I've got a really close friend of mine, lives just a street away from me at my house. He is an entrepreneur, has been his whole life, and we talk constantly about the fact that things that make us successful, and we're not the most successful people out there, right? But we're successful in our own right, is that there's nothing that is beneath us, right? Like, some people believe they don't want to get involved in a nuts and bolts business or a scrap metal business or whatever. I want to sell insurance, or I want to invent this technology. I want to do this. But there's great ways to make a living that you can put your head on your pillow at night knowing that you're doing something that matters. You're keeping airplanes safe. You're helping people build prosthetic limbs. Like, there are things that really, really matter in those businesses, and there are quality people that work for them. And you're just coming in and trying to say, you got a great business. I want to maintain the status quo. And if there's something that we can do to help make the business better, then we're here for that. And that's a really powerful story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. You talk about passion, and I'm not going to say that that money was my passion when I got started. This is my belief, Austin. Some people may not agree with this, but if you're passionate about money, you're not going to survive a business. You can't go into it for the money. I don't know anyone. I never did this for the money, and never didn't know what really that was. It was just the opportunity that I was given, right? It was this burning desire to want to do something. And, I remember making like this incredible sale for my dad, and my dad was like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work out, and, it sounds like me today, right? Like, being skeptical on things. And I remember, like, he didn't give me a commission from that. And, we made like this incredible profit, one day, and it was luck probably had a little bit timing. The thing was that it was like, wow, I can do this. And it was that feeling of doing that. And that same feeling is what we try to do today in the holding company that we're trying to do, right? Like, it's a work in progress. But the thing is that what I'm really passionate about is trying to unlock, like, if you're an investor, it's a zero, and it's a zero-sum game in a lot of cases. I got to find that one thing that other people don't see. I got to look for that opportunity in something. And what is it in that company, right? What is that hidden gem that other people don't see? And sometimes it's talent. It's like, look at this person in the warehouse, right? We find people all the time. And again, we're just kind of starting off. I feel like I'm still kind of a rookie with this. That's the great thing, is that I'm passionate about learning that there's so much more to do. And we just scratched the surface. There's so many other opportunities out there, but it's like finding that one employee or finding that one customer that we may be able to, get more business out of them, or maybe be able to help them with something, right? So there's those opportunities there, but the best thing is watching people grow, right? Like giving people an opportunity. In order for a holding company structure like this to work, you have to have autonomy. We can't be micromanaging these people. And sometimes that's what it becomes. You have to empower people. Some of these people don't want to become empowered. Owners are very controlling, and we do everything. And what happens is when you do that, you are not helping your people, you're making them worse. Because if you want a company to react fast to the markets, to react on an opportunity, to get a quote from a customer, not have to wait for the owner. I mean, I talk to owners all the time. That's one of the biggest things I get to do, is I talk to owners all the time that are selling. And some of them are very proud that I make all the decisions. I sign the checks. And it's like, great, what's going to happen when you sell the business? Like, if you want to get a best value of the company, have it like Warren Buffett says, you need a ham sandwich to run that company. Have it then, if you were to go to coma for a little while, God forbid, that it could be able to run on their own. So trying to see how we can make that happen, which is being done slowly but surely, is really the thing that's passionate, because it's really giving people opportunities. And again, Austin, the thing is that, man, this company that I was talking about that we own today, it's been around for 55 years. Like, it's incredible. Like, if a lot of these companies don't have succession plans, if it isn't for people like us, entrepreneurs and small businesses, this company could have easily closed down, and it's a good business. So the thing is that I'm a part of that. Just gives me chills. I'm just grateful to be a part of that.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, you're preaching to the choir with some of the things that you're saying, which obviously is great. But, for those listeners who are listening, and we'll kind of close with this, because believe it or not, we've gone the whole hour here, but, less than 20% of all businesses in this country will ever transact. Okay. So whatever that means, whether it's succession to the next generation or whatever, and then there's even problems there, right? Like, it goes to the next generation. By the third generation, it's typically fizzled out, but most businesses never will sell. And it's for the very reasons that you just laid out. The owner never lets go of control, never puts in a plan, never does any of the things that they need to make their business transferable. And that's, it's extremely important. And obviously it's a way that you can come in now with your holding company and say, there's something here. Most people aren't going to be interested because of this particular problem, but I'm willing to work through that with this owner and with this team. And you're going to benefit from that. And so will the team, quite frankly. Right. And so you've kind of carved out your own little niche here, which I think is tremendous.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that, Austin. The thing that I've learned the most is that it's the value of my time. That's the biggest thing that I could take away from this whole journey of business. It's the value of my time. It's understanding how much I'm really worth, which I didn't think I was worth a lot. Honestly, I know that sounds crazy, but that's the truth. And it's opportunity cost. When I say yes to something, I'm actually saying no to a good opportunity. And with owners, and I've done the same thing, we're too cheap. We don't want to pay somebody to do the things that somebody else can do that's better. So when I figured out how to do that, and I'm still learning, when I got the right people in place, now I'm able to work on my business, not in my business. And it's huge. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't able to get the right people and understand that, I have to say no. Warren Buffett said it, you want to be a great investor, say no to almost everything. And that's a very hard thing to do, because most of us as business owners, we have a hard time saying no. We really, really do. We want everybody to like us.
Yep, no doubt about it. Well, let's close with this, Dustin. If somebody wants to talk to you, they've got a business they want to sell, or they want to learn from you, whatever it is, whatever reason they'd like to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm more, if anybody wants to talk, not that I know all the answers, you're a new entrepreneur, you want to kind of hear my experience of buying other businesses, I'd be more than happy to help you in that process. I have a Twitter account. I have like 4 followers, Austin. I don't really post anything, but you could reach me. It's Dustin M. Carreon. I'm a little active on LinkedIn, so you could find me there, Dustin Carreon at C.O.I Holdings. My email is dustinc@coiholdings.org.
Gotcha. Well, thanks so much, Dustin. Really appreciated the conversation. I feel like we're kindred spirits in a lot of ways, and look forward to staying in touch with you as well.
Thanks, Austin. I felt like there's so much more to talk about, but I really appreciate your time. Appreciate being on the show.
Yeah, that hour goes fast. We warn people every time, but it's crazy how fast it goes.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast for small business owners by small business owners. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Arizona time for an introduction to another great tycoon. And be sure to follow us on our social media channels for links to all of our episodes and great content.